The A320 is equipped with a very powerful FMC, flight management computer. This electronic device enables the aircraft to be flown virtually automatically. It will climb to preset altitudes, it will automatically calculate the rate of climb and rate of descent, and it will ensure that it is at the exact altitude over any specific point along the route. At first, this can be quite daunting because it needs a little bit of programming in order to get the FMC to carry out what the pilot requires. But in this video, I'm going to simplify it a little and try and adapt it so that it is fairly clear as to what we need to put into the FMC before a flight. The FMC requires an inertial guidance system for it to know exactly where it is. And in order for this guidance system to work correctly, the IRS, the inertial guidance system, has to be initialized before a flight. If the aircraft is started in a cold and dark situation, then that programming has to be done, and it can take over 5 minutes for the system to actually work out where it is exactly in the world. However, in this video we're going to start with the engines running, the aircraft in a state ready for taxi or takeoff, and so the guidance system has already been initialized and the aircraft can be programmed with our route into the FMC. This will save a little bit of time, simplify the operation of the FMC, and it will allow us to use both the FMC and the autopilot inputs to make a successful flight. In the video after this one, we will look at starting the aircraft from a cold and dark situation, and it will then be possible to combine both that start and the system in operation in this video to create a complete flight from cold and dark to takeoff, cruise and landing. Okay, we're now in the cockpit of the A320. We have the engines running, everything is configured for takeoff. This is not strictly correct, but it will enable us to program the FMC a lot quicker. The FMC is here, bottom area of the picture as we're looking at it. And there are two. We'll refer to this one as the left hand, this one as the right. In the flight simulator model, these have two different functions. We're going to concentrate only on the one on the pilot's side. This is the one that we need to enter all the information into. If I use the shortcut button at the top, I can jump very quickly to the FMC. Now, let's just have a think about what the FMC is actually going to do. It is basically a computer which is linked to the aircraft dynamics. It is pre-programmed with all sorts of information, and in the real world pilots can enter company flight numbers and various other data, and it will search the database and make their job considerably easier. Once it has all the information that it requires, it can organize a flight based on the flight dynamics of the aircraft. Once it knows the weight of fuel, the weight of passengers, the wind speed, the air temperature, etc., etc. So now let's just look at how we will input a simple flight from Cardiff to Leeds Bradford. The very first piece of information that it requires is our departure and arrival airports. For that, we need to select this init button, initialization button, and we need to enter here a from and to airport. We are going to fly from Cardiff, E, G, F, F, to Leeds Bradford, which is EGNN. EGNN. Sorry. EGN. It's very sensitive, these switches here. So it's EGFF to EGNN. I'm going to enter that with this button here. The next thing it needs, and you may have to press the init button again to get back to this screen, it needs a flight number. Now in the real world this would obviously be an actual flight number. For our purposes we'll make one up today, we'll call it 001. We'll enter a flight number. It then wants a cost index. That is to do with the fuel efficiency. We'll take a number of about halfway, but let's enter a fuel efficiency of 40. And it wants a cruise flight level and a temperature for takeoff. So let's say we are going to cruise at 20,000 feet. And we will say that the temperature at the moment is 20 degrees. Now these figures of course can be obtained from an accurate weather map of the time you intend to fly. This is just a demonstration. The next thing we need to do is to click on the flight plan page. And we need to put our waypoints in here. Now I'm going to go to Brecon, which is BCN, BCN, and I'm going to enter that below Cardiff in the flight discontinuity. Brecon will be the first one on here, 19 miles from me, that's the one I want. I then want to go to Shawbury, which is SWB, WB, enter in the flight discontinuity below Brecon. Shawbury is 87 miles from me. I need to go back to that page again so I can see that. I can go up and down on this page. I need to see Shawbury and flight plan discontinuity. And my last point is Manchester MCT. Enter that in flight discontinuity. 123 miles from me. So if I check my plan now, I have EGFF Cardiff, Brecon, Shawbury, Manchester, and my final airport, which is Leeds Bradford. I now need to go to the top of my flight plan and select Cardiff and select the departure runway. I'm going to select runway 30. Now I could add here an instrument departure, a SID, standard instrument departure, but I don't have details on my map available to me at the moment, so I'm just going to use the runway direct. So simply insert. Then I need to scroll to the bottom of my final arrival airport, EGNN, and click arrival. I'm going to opt for ILS 32. Again, I could put stars, standard arrivals, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to go straight onto the runway, so I'm going to insert. Now I need to check my route. If I click these arrows up and down, I can scroll through the route. I'm looking for flight plan discontinuities. So I have Cardiff, Brecon, Shawbury, Gloucester, Manchester, Gloucester, then a flight plan discontinuity. Select clear and click it next to the discontinuity to get rid of it. Now if we look at this flight plan in a little more detail, you will see that there are some other pieces of information that have been input by the FMC automatically. We will need some of those as we progress along the route. Next, we are going to select Performance, Perf. We need some information in here. We need the flap setting that I as pilot am going to use. I am going to decide to use 2 flaps, flaps 2. Enter 2, enter it into flaps.
Then right Zulu, left Golf.
You will notice it also says up 0.8. That is the level of trim. I need to set my trim 0.8 up for takeoff. You may have noticed that as soon as I entered my flap setting, the FMC has calculated my V speeds, V1, VR, rotate, and V2. And it has also calculated my flap retraction speeds, 146, 186, and clean flaps at 201. I'm now going to select phase. And if I click the button next to phase, it will go through the phases of the route. This is takeoff. The next phase will be climb. I missed one there a little bit fast. Cruise, descent, and approach. I need the approach because I need to enter the air pressure at my destination airport and the temperature. Again, for reality, I should check the weather on the day. But for this demonstration, I'm going to assume standard air pressure, so that's 1, 0, 1, 3. Enter that as the QNH, air pressure. Temperature, we will say, remains at 20 degrees. Temperature. There is also a setting requirement here on the approach for mag and wind. So this is to do with the direction and the speed of the wind. So I'm just going to select a random number here. I'm going to say that the wind is from 340 degrees and it is at 5 knots. So I enter that there, I get 340 at 5. This will assist the FMC in calculating my landing speeds. Now I'm going to go back through the phases to takeoff.
Call departure, American 1 Heavy, good morning.
And there is a trans-alt number here. This is a transition altitude. Now in Europe, this altitude is 6,000 feet. Once I get above 6,000 feet, I have to set my air pressure gauges on the aircraft to standard air pressure. In America, this altitude is 18,000 feet. It differs to some extent country to country. We will leave this as it's set at the moment at 6,000 feet. And if I scroll through the phases once again, to approach, there is a trans-alt here. I'm going to assume that that is the same, and I'm going to enter 6,000 in there. Okay, That's it. We're now more or less ready to go. I'm going to click back to flight plan. This is the start of my flight plan. If I now switch back to my main display, I can see the beginning of a green route plan on my main display. Once again, if I select more or less of the map in scale, I will see more or less of my route. And if I select from plan to arc and so on, I will get completely different views of my route. Although this isn't particularly clear, this is Cardiff, this is Leeds Bradford, and I have a route line in between. I have two other important markers. As I leave Cardiff, there is a blue arrow going upwards. This is the top of my climb. And when I get towards Leeds Bradford, there is a little white arrow going downwards. That is the top of my descent. So the aircraft will leave Cardiff, climb to 20,000 feet at this point, cruise at 20,000 feet to this point, and then descend to the runway in Leeds Bradford. Okay, it's now time to make my way to the takeoff point. Brakes off, gentle throttle advance, and taxi to my takeoff runway. Okay, we are now at takeoff point. We need to do some final checks on our autopilot settings. First thing here, altitude. I want my cruise altitude to be 20,000 feet. I'm going to dial that up to 20,000. That's the maximum cruise altitude. The FMC will know of altitudes in between. We'll discuss that during the flight. The speed has a yellow dot, the heading has a yellow dot, and the altitude now has a yellow dot. Those dots mean that all of this is under the control now of the FMC. If I right click, I will see numbers. Left click, dot. Right click, numbers. Left click, dot. Right click, left click. I need to know that that has been preset for the FMC. When I've taken off and I click autopilot 1, the autopilot will link to the FMC and the FMC will control this data. I put a setting of flaps 2 into the system of the FMC for takeoff. I now need to increase my flaps to 2. Ready for takeoff. Flaps 2 have now been set. If we look at this display, although it's in a fairly small scale at the moment, the aircraft is going to take off and it will eventually turn right and catch this line. I will zoom in on this as I take off, but I need to see the runway ahead of me for my takeoff roll.
On runway 3.
I have one final check. This is my trim. If you remember, we set trim for up 0.8. There is 0, here is 1 up, 2 up. I need to set it to approximately this point, 0.8. So now set the trim wheel so that is at about 0.8. There is a little tiny marker here and it's just below 1 now, so that's approximately 0.8 up. We're all set now for takeoff. So it's going to be throttles to the toga position, brakes released when the engines are stabilized,
On runway.
take off
Zero.
and initialize my climb. Once I'm established in my flight, gear up, switch the autopilot on and retract flaps as necessary. This instrument here will show me
On
my
runway. 30.
V1,
On runway.
VR and V2
30.
speeds, and it will also show me when to retract my flaps. So as I'm flying out, I need to watch this. And I also need to watch for the lever to climb position flashing here, and then retract the lever to the climb position. Once again, all this happens very quickly, so we just have to keep my eye on everything that I need to do. Brakes on, throttles, engine stabilized, full power, release brakes.
Turn right, taxi, Zulu and Golf, full 70, your right, straight with me. Zulu's off, full shortness.
I'm watching my speed indication here. There's a little one, V1,
Clear for takeoff, your right, American 1 Heavy.
VR, rotate. Positive climb, gear up. Autopilot to on. Now I'm going to zoom in on these instruments. Okay, I'm only interested in the instruments here at the moment. Now the aircraft is now in its first turn. You can see now that the aircraft is turning automatically to follow this line. The lever is flashing to climb position. Reduce this to climb. Throttle is now in climb position. Aircraft is automatically turning. First waypoint is here, Barakan, and it is 18.8 miles away. Flaps up to flaps 1. Flaps clean. The aircraft is now picking up my desired route and will now turn to follow that green line. Now at 3,600 feet. It is heading towards a speed of 250, which is the speed that the FMC has calculated. When it reaches that speed, the throttles will reduce and it will continue its climb towards Brecon. So I am now in a steady climb towards my first waypoint of Brecon, BCM. .7 miles to Brecon. If there is any height restriction for Brecon, then the FMC will know that and it will reduce the altitude to whatever the prevailing regulation is. Should there be a speed reduction or noise reduction, it will also reduce throttles as necessary. I am now passing through 9,000 feet. Speed is now around 250 knots. QNH is flashing, showing me that it is set to 1030. That is standard air pressure. Eight miles from Brecon. The FMC has now increased the speed request to approximately 290. It is now reaching 290 and will then throttle off at 290. 13,200 feet. It is attempting to reach 20,000 feet by the time it reaches this arrow. I'll increase the scale here so that we can see it a little more clearly. Just now approaching Brecon, 2.3 miles to go. Once it reaches the Brecon point, it will automatically turn slightly and follow the new green line. We're now reaching 15,300 feet. Once again, it's trying to get 20,000 feet by this point. It's now beginning to turn gently to the right to the new heading, and it's now heading for Shorebury, 66.5 miles away, 16,800 feet, 290 knots. (18,000 feet), and we are just short of our top of climb point.
Trying back for 932 as quick as possible. Okay, thank you.
19,000 feet. 20,000 feet is my set altitude. I'm just reaching 20,000 feet. I have just passed the top of climb point, and the throttles have now automatically reduced to maintain my cruise speed. I'm now in the cruise phase, and I will continue at 20,000 feet until I reach my top of descent point. If I now alter my range to say 80 miles, I can see my present position with Brecon just behind me. I can see my next waypoint, SWB, and I can see my top of descent point. When I get near the top of descent point, I am going to have to do something else to the autopilot. So I will now continue to fly until I reach Shorebury, SWB, and then come back to the video. Now I am around 12 miles from SWB, and I'm still at 20,000 feet. But I now need to think about what is going to happen here. And I'm going to look back at the FMC. At SWB, it's telling me that I should be doing 287 knots, and I should be at flight level 200, 20,000 feet. At the top of descent, I should still be at 20,000 feet. At MCT, Manchester, I should still be at 20,000 feet. Then I should decelerate to a flight level of 12,900, flight level 129. It has then put in some other points, ILF 72 for example, and And if I scroll up through this, you will see that it's put ILF 4 and then the airport runway. So it has created a couple of other waypoints of its own. And when I reach ILF 72, I should only be at 3,000 feet. And when I reach ILF 4, I should only be at 1,990 feet. Now I am going to have to tell the autopilot those altitudes as I near these points. So I'm going to continue at 20,000 feet till I reach MCT. Then I need to put in a flight level of 12,900 feet. So I shall continue to fly until I reach MCT and then show what happens on the autopilot. I am now reaching the top of descent point. Here is MCT, and here are the other points that the FMC has put in: ILF 72, ILF 4. I am going to need to decelerate and reduce my altitude as I approach this leg, and then make my final turn to the runway at EGNN. Now I have a message here saying decelerate. If I look at my FMC where it says decelerate, the next speed is 260. I'm going to dial that into the autopilot. The aircraft will now decelerate. I also need to now descend to 19,900, so I need to put that into my altitude setting. I also need to be at 3,000 feet by ILF 72. I'm going to dial 3,000 into my altitude setting. 3,000. Left click, so it is on FMC. Speed, heading, altitude, now by the FMC. I am now descending. My speed is reducing, and I am aiming to be at 3,000 feet by ILF 72. I'm now 13 miles from ILF 72. My speed is descending to approximately 250. I'm passing through 10,600 and aiming to be at 3,000.
Calvin 6349, turn left heading 270.
Now looking at my final approach, here is ILF 72 where I'm aiming to be at 3,000 feet. I then need to be descending to the runway.
3630, descend and maintain 4,000.
By the time I reach ILF 4, I should be at 1,990 feet. I will need to dial that number in once I have passed ILF 72 at 3,000 feet. The aircraft is now approaching ILF 72 and is beginning its turn to that waypoint, presently at 7,500 feet. Speed descending 1 190.
Tower 6349, contact over tower
I'm
1.
now coming into line with the airport runway. Shortly I shall switch to the ILS. By the time I reach ILF 4, I need to be at 1990. So I'll dial that into the autopilot now. Click the 100s.
Number 3630, your email from Simcoe, cleared
And
island.
I should be able to dial 1990. 1900. I'm going to leave it slightly below what I actually need because I can't dial 10s in. I'm now going to switch to the LS mode and rotate the knob to LS, and I will shortly see my ILS bars and my glide slope. The FMC has auto-tuned the frequency 11090 course 320 because that is already in its database. Here is my localizer bar. There is my glide slope. I'm a bit high. I need to descend faster. Now this is my fault. I've been doing so much. I've been talking and leaving the alterations to the autopilot too late. I am now over Manchester Airport and I am much too high. So what I'm going to do is to switch the autopilot to manual, make a big circle and intercept the ILS manually as I've done in the previous videos. Had I done this correctly, it would have automatically picked up the ILS and I could have flown it to the ground manually just for the last few hundred feet. I apologise for that, but hopefully this will have shown you how the system works. I'm now going to take over manually, make a circle approach and come back for landing.
Tower 120.1.
Okay, I'm going to now reduce my speed manually to 192. I'm going to descend manually to 1900 feet. And I'm going to set my heading manually and fly a circle back to the airport. I'm descending now at 1,900 feet per minute to a height of 1,900 feet, reducing my speed to 192. I'm presently flying on a heading of 348. Now the course of the runway is 320. I'm going to turn 180 degrees. So that will bring me back to 140, and I should then be flying parallel with the runway. I now have the runway in front of me and the airport, and I am just to the right of it, flying more or less parallel with the runway. So I'm now going to make a manual approach to the ILS.
Juliet, roger, clear, visual approach, runway 19 center.
Runway that I want at Leeds Bradford. So I'm going to fly straight ahead for a while and then make a wide sweeping turn to intercept the ILS for runway 32. Okay, my localizer bars are active, my glide slope is active. I now need to make a wide sweeping turn to intercept the two of these. The airport is behind me and to my present left. Okay, I'm going to make a nice wide sweeping turn now.
Alright, we'll just take 19 to the left if I can for you.
My flight course will be 320 degrees. So I'm going to head for 350, giving myself a 30-degree final turn.
1720, maintain 180 knots or greater till Mexico. 180 or better till Mexico, American 1720.
Going to reduce my speed, 165, flaps 2.
Roger.
The airport is now to my left. I should intercept the ILS and glide slope very shortly. Going to dial in 320, 337.
Got with 6349, roger. Follow that American 737, you're clear visual approach, only 19 center.
The airport's now in front of me.
American 1720,
Reduce my speed.
34.42. 3442, American 1720, good day. ISO 645, it's going to maintain 3000.
ILS. Click localizer. Glide slope is active. Click approach. Reduce my speed. Increase my flaps. Gear down. Full flaps. Autopilot off, manual takeover,
50,
throttles back,
40, 30, 20, 10, 5.
reverse thrust, spoilers,
Now,
brakes,
100 meters.
engines to idle,
100 meters.
spoilers down, turn off the runway, and we are safely at Leeds Bradford. I do apologise for that manual takeover. I was doing so many things during the making of the video that I wasn't fully concentrating. But because we now know how we can interwork the manual control and the automatic control, at least I was able to recover and make a safe landing, albeit not a perfect one. All that remains now is to taxi to the gate. Welcome to Leeds Bradford Airport.